Welcome to Torah Smash, the podcast for nerdy Jews, where our lives of Jewish learning collide with our love of nerd culture. I am Barak Malkin, and joining me today are
Ethan Lane Miller,
RDY.
In each episode, we discuss what we lovingly call a Torah Smash, which we have defined as a beautiful collision of one thing from the world of Judaism with another from nerd culture. I'm excited for today's episode. We're having another Movie Midrash.
Yay!
Woohoo! We're going to be looking at Thor, Love, and Thunder, Thor 4. So let's do some initial thoughts before we dive into this topic. How did everybody like the movie?
I liked it more than it seems like most people did.
Okay.
I agree with a lot. Like everyone that I read a review from said, "Oh my God, Ragnarok's so much better. This was terrible." And I will say, yes, Ragnarok was better, but that doesn't make this one terrible.
This one was better than The Dark World.
That's not saying too much in my opinion, but yeah, I agree with RDY. I liked it a lot. I didn't like it as much as Ragnarok, but I might rank it as the third best Thor film.
I would agree.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah, rank your Thor movies. I think I would go 3, 1, 4, 2.
Same. Ragnarok, Thor, Dark, Love and Thunder, Dark World.
Yeah.
You couldn't see my brain melting like these two could when they did the numbers, but yeah, I actually would be a little different. I would go Ragnarok and then Love and Thunder and then the original and then Dark World.
Oh, good.
All right.
Yeah, nice.
There's we'll talk about it in a little bit. There are some things about this movie that are a little personal for me.
Okay. Yeah. The jokes, I say, a lot of really good jokes. And then he started getting to like what I'll call Adam Sandler level of like really overdoing it. I think we got enough screaming goats for a couple of minutes, and then they kept bringing the screaming goats. And I think there was enough of that. I think you could have left it alone. I think it's fine. But I made like a list of like things that I loved in this that were great. Like I really enjoyed the fact that Jane Foster could scatter the Mjolnir pieces as like an attack.
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty cool, unique way to do that. I loved like baby toy Mjolnirs or like the kid toy when he like gave them all powers. And I liked that it was like a tale told from the perspective of Korg, which is probably why I think there was a lot less action and dialogue from Guardians of the Galaxy, because Korg isn't as familiar with them. He was telling it from his perspective. And so I think that's why they were a lot less, I don't know what the word is. It wasn't as enjoyable as like their own movies, because this was Korg's story told about Thor. And so leaving like dialogue out and action pieces out for like, they just stood around for a lot of it.
I thought there would be more of them. Like they'd be through like the first quarter or third of the film. Instead, it was just like
5 minutes.
Peace out.
Yeah.
This makes me wonder actually if Volume 3 is going to start where they split ways.
Oh, maybe.
Or if Volume 3 is going to fill in the gap. Like I don't.
Like a Black Widow thing. Go back in time.
Yeah, everyone's been calling it as Guardians of the Galaxy. So
they've got Volume 3. Volume 3.
This might be. This might be metagaming a little bit, but like, is Chris Hemsworth in Guardians of the Galaxy 3?
I don't know. I don't know yet. I will say my favorite joke. The movie could have easily ended for me when Melissa McCarthy came out as Hela. I died.
I love that so much.
Her husband was
there as like the stage director. I loved that so much. I turned to my friend. I was like, "We could leave now." That was the best part of this movie. That was amazing. Yeah. Any other favorites or least favorites?
I am just glancing at the IMDb for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, and I do not see Chris Hemsworth, but I do see Sylvester Stallone.
Oh, he's coming back?
So we're going to get Stakar, which is awesome. Nice. That's a great plot line. So
no one's brought it up. I really enjoyed Christian Bale. I thought he added nuance in a way at least in a way that I don't typically feel I see or enjoy in a comic book villain, particularly one that's like a one-off like this. It might sound silly to say, it felt more real than some of the other big bads that we faced, particularly the more non-earthbound big bads.
Yeah. His love for kids when he like was with them in the cage, I think his love for his daughter, but his darkness that's overcome him made him so creepy and like wanting to talk to the kids as like children, and they were like not having it. That was great.
I think Christian Bale is probably one of the best actors they've had play a villain in the Marvel universe.
Yeah, I'd take that.
He really is a phenomenal actor. And, you know, I always say when it comes to like Batman, since 1989, I've been saying that the key to casting Batman is to cast Bruce Wayne. And now that there's more than just Batman movies, the key to casting any superhero, I believe, is to cast the alter ego. So when they made that decision to cast Christian Bale as Batman, I think his Bruce Wayne was a little bit more of the egotistical playboy Bruce Wayne that I know from the comic books. I think better than the Michael Keaton one, who was more of the nerdy Bruce Wayne. And speaking of Christian Bale being both, Barack and I were talking earlier about crossover actors and how Christian Bale is now one of the few who's done both a Marvel and a DC movie, like Ryan Reynolds, Angela Bassett, who else?
There's a list of like 10 or so that existed
Ben
already.
Affleck, also Batman.
Tom Hardy did Venom and Bane. Yeah, there's a short list, but it's getting longer.
Yeah. And Chris Evans, who not only crossed over by being in The Losers, he also has 2 roles in the Marvel universe with the Human Torch and Captain America, and much better as Captain America, in my humble.
Yes.
I think he did a nice Human Torch. I'm looking forward to whatever the next one is, but I think he did good. Any other reviews on this before we dive into our topic? I think overall it was good. It fell slightly flat for me, but overall enjoyable.
It was campy, and I find campy fun. You mentioned the end, the mini Mjolnirs, the
toys, whatever they had.
I thought that was so much fun. I was laughing. It was very enjoyable. Was it silly? Yes, but that's okay.
Yeah. I think my issue is that the piece for Thor in the comics, I think there's like 2 things I'm looking for in these movies. One is the like outer space, other realm type of thing. And they're getting that 100% in these Taika Waititi movies. The other piece that we're not getting as much with him is his like regal royaltiness of being raised under a king. He just feels like a slapstick hero-ish. Yeah. Like he doesn't have that. Like he seems like a bumbling lord. Like he is not as intelligent. He's not as well spoken. It's just very for the humor, and that's the piece that I'm glad they're doing the outer space, other realm sort of thing with him. When like the crossover with human pieces, right? Every superhero just feels like they're a little bit campy.
I also think that's Taika Waititi.
No, I totally agree with you.
I've seen all of his movies. I absolutely adore him as a director. And I think that in that world of Ragnarok where he got to play around with improv, it got a little bit goofy in this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that goofiness is Chris Hemsworth, because his Ghostbusters role
that was gold.
Was hysterical.
Yeah. He definitely has the chops, which is nice. All right, so let's dive in. So for today's topic, I want to take a look at the role that gods play in this film, our expectations for gods, and the different characters' perceptions of the role of gods. And the scene that sparked my idea for this episode is at the beginning. After watching his daughter die in his arms, Gore loses all hope and wanders across his sun-dried, desolate planet until he finds an oasis. He meets, I think his name was Rapu, like the sun god or whatever he was, and the god that he had been worshiping and who he prayed to for rescue. And he says he lost his village, his home, his family, and that his daughter just died. But through all of that, he still had his faith for his people's God, this undying irreverence. So what do you think is the Jewish connection that will connect to this idea in the movie?
Is it people who turn from God?
No, it is not. It's a good guess.
Is it the second commandment? You shall have no other gods but me.
Ooh, that's a nice one. It is not.
Because even
because this is like just polyamorous God, not polyamorous. This is this.
That's a very different God.
I mean, he kind of looked like he was.
Right. It was right, at least with what Zeus was saying throughout his speech, right? This polytheistic, right, movie. No, it's not the no other gods before me. It's not commandment 2.
Is it the general acknowledgement in Judaism that there are other gods?
No. These are all good guesses.
Because you don't say don't unless somebody do.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I was thinking of was like something like tying into the golden calf. But if it's not about
No. It is. It's a
spurning
specific. It's not, but it is. It's a story. I'm tying this to a specific story that, to me, just felt like another clue. Just felt so much mirrored exactly Gore's story at the beginning.
Ooh,
yeah. Go ahead, guess.
Is it Elijah and the prophets of Baal?
Oh, it is not Elijah.
Okay, because that's why I kind of deflated when, like, listeners, when Barak was talking, I had an epiphany and my eyes grew wide and I smiled, and then he continued and I kind of deflated because I realized it wasn't quite it.
Nope. Another specific story.
Clue time.
Another clue. It is about a man. I'm trying to give.
Great. Okay, I know what it is now.
Great. You do.
Yeah. Adam. His name is Man.
It is about a man who also loses his
Job.
Yes. Loses what? Everything. Yeah. So today we're going to be looking at the story of Job, or in Hebrew, Iyov. So just looking at Job's and Gore's background story to start, it is almost identical as Moses to Superman to me. Job is from the land of Uz, which is stated to be near a desert. And then he loses all of his property, his land, his health, and his children, seemingly just like Gore. And the piece where it differs is it says in the story of Job that it happens because someone, an accuser, says that the only reason Job is so pious is because God rewards him, and that God should test his faith and allow the angels to take everything.
Actually, it's not an accuser; it's the accuser.
The accuser. Thank you. Not Ronan, the accuser.
And in Hebrew, the accuser is Hasatan.
Satan.
It's Satan.
Yeah. And in the Thor movie, it appears that gods just didn't care at all for him, and they viewed him as insignificant. So that's where the piece for me differs. But most of the story of Job is not what is usually discussed. Right. Everybody talks about he lost everything and all these pieces, and he still is reverent. Most of what makes up the story of Job is conversations that he has with some of his friends. And I wrote the Eliphaz, Bildad probably, and Zophar, who come to visit for sitting Shiva for him, for losing his family and everything. Right. The majority focuses on 3 questions and their conversations around them. So I want to take a look at those 3 questions in relation to the themes in Thor, Love and Thunder. I also want to start by expanding and say that I think each of the main characters are trying to explain the bad that happened to them, but in different ways. So while Gore really made me have the epiphany of like, oh, this is Job, I think all of them face this struggle of they want something and they're losing it, and they need to come to terms with that, whatever that is. So Gore, as we said, his daughter's death and his life, and the people that he's struggling against are the gods. For Thor, it's people who love him, like family and those sort of things. And so the thing that he's struggling against is just the concept and idea of love. And for Jane Foster, the thing that is ailing her is cancer, and the piece that she's struggling against is science. So those are the pieces for me that each of them are facing. So as we go through, we can reference those for those. So the first question, and I'm going to combine it. We'll do the first question, the second question, because they're kind of close. The first question is God just? And for Gore, we can say, are gods just? And question 2 was, does God run the universe on the strict principle of justice? So I found them to be, I know they're different questions, but that's where we'll start. So is God just in relation to this movie? And in God, remember, for Gore, it's God, for Thor, it's love, and for Jane, it's science. So are those entities just or running on the principle of justice for those people?
There's so much in that question.
I know. This is a heavy topic.
And
I said that with such excitement.
And when it comes to the book of Job is really 2 books. And you mentioned it a little bit, that it's the 3 friends, but the narrative of the book of Job is chapter 1, 2, and 42.
Right.
Everything else is philosophical debate.
Yeah.
Which is part of why it's so studied and deep, but also part of why no one discusses the middle.
Right. I think the other parts are so much easier to talk about, of what he loses and then just the ending piece as well. So
for sure.
We'll get to. Yeah.
Second, and this is a little bit of a tangent, the fact that Jane Foster became an embodiment of Thor, worthy of wielding Mjolnir, reminded me of in the first movie when Thor was kind of explaining his world to her, and he said, you have what you call science and what you call magic, and in my world, they're one and the same. And she is now a scientist imbued with the magic of her own, worthiness in outwardly form, that with all of its healing power and everything. So she becomes that amalgamation of science and magic.
But I think in this episode, really struggling hard, right? It opens with her talking about her scientist side of it. And in cancer and trying to find the cure for cancer is like a prevalent piece of her story. And she struggles hard and wants to think that she can overcome that by using the magic, right? That science is this thing that is controlling her. How can I avoid that ending by utilizing some other form and trying to go against science is not just for me anymore. It's not giving me the answers I want, right?
Yeah. And that's really the whole purpose of both science and religion.
Right.
We're trying to find the answers to all of life's greatest questions, which is also what Job's friends were doing. This is to see someone in this state who they know is a righteous man. They know he's good. They know he's loyal to God, and they don't understand why he stays faithful to the God that would take everything to him. And that's what inspires the philosophy. And that's what inspires some of the greatest books in our Jewish corpus and some of the greatest books ever.
Yeah. And I'll say, I think that's a nice point. I'm asking these questions. There's no answers. These are like very high end. And like, please do not listen to this episode and think that you're going to get answers of, is God just, and does God run the universe on the principle of justice? Yeah. No. Go ahead.
The point of this podcast is not to give you the answers. It's to have you have more elevated questions at the end.
It's very Jewish. We're not going to answer the questions. We're going to give you more
questions.
Barak, did you pick those 3 because 3 is a nice number? Because what I'm curious about is, would you also consider analyzing Valkyrie?
Yeah. I only picked 3 because it's a short number, but you could talk about Valkyrie, you can talk about Korg, all of the main characters that we have relationships with throughout, I think are also trying to figure out their balance and struggle with some concept. I don't think they resolve as nicely. That's why I sort of step to those 3.
Yeah.
I think Valkyrie's is struggle is her leadership. Correct, and the thing that she's fighting against is her want to be like her Valkyrie history, and that how that's not tying in as strongly as she hoped for. So
yeah, when I think about where these characters ended up, like by the end of this movie, I mean, certainly the big 3 that we're talking about all had a resolution where it felt like they were at peace with where they were at that moment.
Yeah.
Valkyrie, I'm not sure that she was at peace, but she was put in a situation where she had no choice but to stay with her people,
right,
and be their leader. So I don't know if it
as
left
opposed
her
to somebody
at peace.
going off to war. No, but it resolved that side of that type of the story. But we still don't yes, she stayed with them, but she stayed with them before the movie started. So was she a more competent leader after that point? Because she said, to me, it felt like she stayed pretty much the same as when we started. She just was with her people as a leader, which is where the movie started.
I mean, I think
her struggle with leadership happened in Endgame.
Yeah, at the end of Endgame, when she's like, funny joke. Yeah, I agree. I think this is still something. That's why I didn't keep her in this, because I don't think it's as strong of a resolve as the other characters.
Yeah, I buy that. I think the only solution is she needs a standalone movie, and I would pay money to see it.
I would.
I would take that too. Yes, a Marvel. Come on, there's all these like great female characters, and you gave us Black Widow with like such a not great film. Give us a Valkyrie movie, please.
On behalf of Jewish nerds and our dozens of listeners.
Yeah, we are at hundreds of listeners at that point. Can we change our phrasing, please? I think we can say our hundreds of listeners, because we're now at that point, which is very exciting. I know. Is that crazy? Yeah. Yay, us.
Congratulations, Barak and Ethan.
RD Weissel has dozens of listeners.
There are like 2 who are here for me.
Anybody?
Hi, Mom.
Anybody have any like other comments on that question? Like in Job, we're not supposed to understand why these things happen to Job. It's too complex, but the movies can't do that. So in terms of these movies, like, are the gods just, and do they run the universe on the principle of justice?
Yeah. So my gut instinct, like my knee-jerk reaction was no. Like all three of those characters really go through some stuff that's really not great. But then, as I thought more about it, and I think like where the three of them ended up by the end of the movie was almost like, well, they didn't just all have a resolution, but they had a resolution that felt like they were at peace with, which I thought was a really important, thing to know. If we're talking about like gods or like fate or the universe being just to them, like they all ended up in a place where they were at peace.
Yeah. So do you think that the ends justified the means sort of thing in these cases, whatever they went through?
Oh God. Oh.
Yeah.
The real light questions. I mean,
well, if they all ended at peace, was the struggle worth it? Like they grew in different ways, right? There's things that they learned, but it's a story. It's a movie story. So I think they have
a character has to learn if it's going to be a good movie. That's what creates dynamism in characters. That's why I don't watch Woody Allen. Yes, I think a modicum of learning happens for each of them, but do I think there's justice? And this is what's sticking in my craw and why I've been quiet a little bit, because I'm going to the justice that we are familiar with from Adonai. Mm-hmm. And it's a very different type of justice than that which gets meted out by even Thor, but especially Zeus.
Right.
And by I forget the sun god's name that you mentioned earlier.
Rapu. I don't think he's a sun god. I think she's just a god. I don't think they named him, but his name was Rapu. I think it's Rapu.
So I think there was zero justice from Rapu. That was only, selfishness. Humans are there to fuel our needs. And when I'm finished with them, I'll find another group.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. And Zeus was not too far off from that.
No, Zeus was,
it was more
of a resigned.
Yeah. I agree with you. I think in this movie, they are really making gods out to be these gods, right? Granted, they like reference, that's the god of carpentry, which is probably going to be Jesus.
I totally thought that was going to be
yes.
Yeah. So like he's in there. But he's at this meeting of discussing when the annual orgy is going to be, right? But they all wanted to hear Zeus talk, and they didn't want to hear Thor talk about this impending threat. They really made gods out to be this terrible, unthinking thing. But we have Thor, and we have Valkyrie, and we have, he had mentioned, I don't remember the name of the giant god like that was slain where we found Sif. But he's like, that was the nicest god, you'd ever meet. And still they were killed. That the ones that existed, the ones that existed that we met were just seemingly not overly caring about their people. They're going to get more praise.
Maybe I'm overthinking it, but it would make sense to me that the gods who care would be with their people and therefore more vulnerable. Like, I mean, it's why, right. It's why, like, when he goes to New Asgard, it's like, great, I've got Valkyrie here. I've got Thor here. But all these other gods who are jerks are all hidden in their secret bunker.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point.
So maybe I'm taking it a little too far to say this, because God in the Bible is super involved. Sorry, God in the Torah is super involved. God in the rest of the Bible sends tools to do God's bidding. And God in the Talmud has rabbis who are connected to God in such a way that they can be miracle workers. But God of today, where is God? So does that mean that our God is not a good God anymore?
No. And I let's do this. I'm going to lead in. That's going to lead us nicely into question 3 and sort of my response to that. So question 3 that Job and his friends explore is, how is Job's suffering to be explained? And he has another friend who visits him, aside from the 3, called Elihu, who says that Job's situation is because his suffering is to avoid future sin and to build character. And at the end of the whole thing, God sort of says, you can't possibly understand the complexity of the universe and everything that I am managing and beyond. And that's the end. And so in your question, you said like God of today is where is God? Because, he's not the same entity that we sort of read about. I think it's more in I side with the it's too complex answer of like, I'm totally okay thinking that everything is too much for me to imagine, especially now that we have these new NASA photos showing us that like That picture was from, if you were to hold a grain of rice up to the sky, that segment of sky was that photo. So,
and folks, listeners, this episode is being recorded about a week after that photo came out. So we're still excited about it.
So that's right. Whatever new photos or things have come out, you find little aliens in those pictures or something. We haven't discovered that yet.
Oh, man. So I was going to say, much like the James Webb pictures are from something in the past, this podcast is from something a little bit in the past. We're sure there are more incredible James Webb photos that have come out since.
Yeah.
Nice.
So I don't know if our God is in there. Like, we don't have really another name aside from like Adonai or Yahweh, and that was not mentioned in her tour of the gods sitting around.
Yeah, no.
Right. He is not the God of carpentry. We don't have it.
I'm going to interrupt you just for a second, to say that scene of, know, Zeus holding court with the other gods, because that was one of my favorite scenes in the whole movie. And it was one of those, like, I was holding up my cell phone and tapping it going, pause. I want to look.
There was like over 50 gods in that scene.
Oh my, there had to be, probably more than that. It's like, it reminded me of the scene in one of the inferior Star Warses where they have the council. The council, and you see like ETs, and you see like other. So like I wanted to because the ones that I remember, which are not going to be many, are like the Easter Island dudes, the Mayan gods. And so I feel like that scene was a representation of cross-culturalism that may be unparalleled in cinema at this point. So I would love to, like, when it's on Disney Plus or whatever, pause that scene and just like, take notes, like see who I can recognize and then take pictures of the ones I don't.
Yeah. It also introduced the idea to the MCU that all of these different religions exist and are part of it, as well as their afterlives, right? We've seen Black Panther's afterlife. We've now seen Valhalla. It says that if all of these places have gods, Moon Knight, that if all of these places have these gods and they have an afterlife to them, that all of those afterlives exist within this MCU universe, which opens up a whole new world of opportunities for other movies and characters to explore, which is very
isn't the afterlife an alternative universe?
I was thinking the same thing. Like, what's the difference between
I would call another realm.
Realm. Yeah. What's the difference between that and the Loki variants being pruned?
Right.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I don't know.
Beautiful.
Great question. You were going to say something. It sounded like you were leading into something with your you loved the scene in the Gods Council.
I get very excited when I see cross-culturalism respected.
Oh.
And as campy and as goofy and as fun as the movie was, I do not think they were poking fun at any other culture at any point. And maybe the Carpenter, but that's like the one it's okay to make fun of because that's most people.
Right.
But the respect that they have for other religions, cultures, the respect that they're showing between multiverse and Ms. Marvel and Moon Knight and now Love and Thunder of the LGBTQ plus world and just normalizing.
Just groups of people. There are lots of groups.
Difference. I love it.
I totally agree. And I've watched like a couple of YouTube breakdowns and a lot of them match their cultural gods imageries and figures and depictions to the T. Like they did a really great job of making sure that they're represented properly, which was very cool to see. You should Google like the gods that are in Thor, Love and Thunder, and the people really have an eye for that. It's crazy.
That's great.
Yeah. So did we talk about the third question? I don't remember anymore.
I don't think we did.
So
I just stopped counting at one.
So explaining, right? They explain they stop counting on it, like Job's suffering and the suffering we talked about a little bit of Gore and of Thor and of Jane and their things. And Elihu in the Job story said it's because suffering is to avoid future sin and to build character. I think it's the way that the movie goes because it's a movie. But I don't know if there's any other reasons or explanations that you guys think exist for their suffering in the movie.
So this is where I think this film gets very personal for me, as someone who has watched a very close family member battle cancer, and to have it be not a very straightforward battle either. I read one review before we went into the movie, and I was familiar with what the Jane Foster storyline would be. So I was able to go into this kind of knowing, like, you know, we all have our triggers, we all have our trigger warning. So I was glad to know about this. And there was something for me that was both very empowering and also very sad and tragic in watching Jane Foster. I'm almost speaking out loud right now. It's almost like going through the phases of grief of her own mortality and like realizing that like these powers aren't actually going to, like, they can only take you so far. And when we think about the suffering angle, like I have very strong opinions about, you know, I don't know that the ends justify the means, but I'm very biased in that regard.
As in, you do not always believe the ends justify the means.
No, I mean, I think it makes for a good story. And I think that obviously Jane Foster grew as a character. Like there's no denying that, and that took place in this film. And obviously with the post-credit scene of there being an afterlife and her continuing to exist and learn these lessons, like that's great. But in our own mortality, you know, I hope there's Valhalla waiting for us at the end of everything. But it's, you know, it's tough if you battle this disease and the disease wins. And it's like, well, what great payoff do I have? And we have our own beliefs on what that payoff is as Jews. And I say that knowing that just that statement contains a wide range of possibilities and what that means. But like, you know, this is fundamentally how does the universe work stuff that we're asking. Like, is there a payoff to suffering? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Fortunately, in this movie, there was.
I think that's the mixture between science and religion right there. Science is clinical and it acknowledges the things that are interpreted as negative in the world, like illness, and says, this is the way the world works, and let's work to deal with it with medicine. And the way religion works is that it looks at that and says, let's get together and love each other so that we can deal with the pain of suffering together.
Question that you just made me think of. If she did not have cancer, would Jane Foster have been deemed worthy to wield Mjolnir?
Ooh, that's an interesting question.
I think yes, just because of the flashback scene where he said, protect her at all costs. My question is, why did Mjolnir call out to her? And maybe it's because Mjolnir felt that she was diagnosed with cancer, but he could have found her before stage 4. Could have found her before stage 4. So I don't know why at that point Mjolnir said that, because Mjolnir could not protect Jane at that point because it was too late. And so I think yes. And there probably could have been another situation, but I think the storyline is so dramatic and impactful that that's why they used it in the comics, as opposed to just her being in danger for, you know, attack from something, as opposed to like this terrible disease.
There are some things that suffering brings out in us. Whether it's our own pain or a loved one's pain, when we experience it, we find strength in places that we didn't know existed. And perhaps it was the cancer that allowed Jane to tap into a certain strength of character that awakened Mjolnir to make her worthy. Or perhaps it was the point where she was giving up fighting cancer and Mjolnir said, no, we're not done yet. You have one more trick. And, you know, but this is why we have minyanim. Why we have a minyan is a quorum, a minimum number of people required to say certain things, but one of them is Kaddish. And Kaddish is a prayer that brings pain to people. So you need 9 others there to say it, to hold you up while you are saying Kaddish. That's why we have Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick, because we understand that when the medicine isn't doing everything it needs to do, when the physical therapy isn't doing everything it needs to do, sometimes the loving touch of a friend can be miraculous.
Yeah.
I think I have a different view to a point than you, Ethan, for the reasons, right? The end justify the means. I don't think I always think that the ends justify the means, but I have my mindset is more of everything happens for a reason. And I cannot possibly know what that reason is, right? The whole God's answer of like everything's too complex for you to understand. I unfortunately had my mom passed away the week after my sister and I graduated from college. It was very sudden, unexpected. And it took me a very long time to really properly process that grief. But I also know, looking at the way that my life went, if my mom had not passed away, I would not have met my wife and have the family that I do now. Like the things and I don't think that specific action caused this other thing to happen, but there's a correlation there, maybe not a causation, that for me, it doesn't make me say, that's the reason my mom passed away. But I gives me this understanding of like, I cannot possibly understand why she would have died unexpectedly. And that I do believe that there's this complexity that I cannot understand. And that sort of helps me by not understanding. Just understanding that there's not going to be understanding makes me feel better about a lot of stuff. And I think calms me down for a lot of the anxiety and pieces in the world, because I could not. And there's tons of other examples in my life of like, if that bad thing didn't happen, then this great thing would not have happened. And my wife is 100% the only other person in the world for me. And I do not believe that I would have met her if my mom did not pass away.
I think Michelle Malkin, the most patient woman.
And as you say that, Barak, like I think as we tie it to Thor, Love and Thunder, and we think about Thor and Jane and Gore, it's a good question. Would any of those three have ended up where they were if things had not happened the way that they had happened? I don't know. I think it's a very interesting way to think about it, that they couldn't have ended up where they ended up at the end of the movie by taking any other path.
Yeah, I think that's true for a lot of things in life, as well as in the comic books, that our ability to step up to a situation for which we are the right person hinges on everything that's happened to us up to that moment. I think the death of my father made me a better rabbi for people who've also lost loved ones. I was not as young when my dad died as you were when your mom died, but it was another too soon kind of thing. And it helped me understand people in a different way. Same as when Natalie and I lost a son. It helps me understand things in a different way. It was a very, very late term pregnancy loss that you can hear the story of another time. Or dear listeners, if you'd like to listen to StoryCorps and Google David and Natalie Young, you can find our story. But these moments of pain, and we've talked, like each of the three of us has now brought up something painful and terrible and difficult. No, not as bad as Job, and probably not even as bad as Gore, but we all have that in common. And really, so does everyone. Everyone that has lived has suffered. Everyone that has loved has felt pain. And that's because when we do things like love, we open our hearts, and that exposes our heart to the ability to be hurt, whether it's hurt by the person or hurt by things that happen to the person that we love. And that can be a beautiful thing, that we love enough to feel pain.
Yeah, I think when we all experience these really hard times in our lives, that if you have the right guidance, and going back to our Wanda episode, right? If you've got the right guidance in that piece, you're able to, I think, create a much larger understanding and kindness and patience for others, because you now can step into a different set of shoes that you didn't have before. And the hope is that just in general, you can do that and try to realize that everybody has something going on. So I think that's a beautiful message. I appreciate that. I want to be mindful of the time for our listeners. I had one other thing. I didn't mention this in the earlier piece. We had said that there is the accuser for the Job story. And I just wanted to mention that in this story, I believe that person is a thing, and that is the shadow sword in the movie, or the necro sword, which I'll say in the comics, for those that don't know, the necro sword is one of the first beings or entities that is a symbiote. But because Marvel doesn't have the full rights to symbiotes, it is a complete shadow. It still has like the same sort of tendencies and other, it influences those that hold it. It just is more of a symbiote type character as opposed to a shadow realm character. But I liked what they did with it. I think the idea was there. But fun fact.
I had no idea. That's really cool.
Yeah. Any other things people want to throw out regarding Thor: Love and Thunder before we wrap this thing up?
I hope that this is not stealing the thunder that you love, but I thought that there was another through line.
Yeah, go ahead.
And as much as I love the Job connection, I think the through line is right in the title, and it is love, because there were so many different forms of love. There was sibling love, there was love of teammates, there was romantic love, and that romantic love had different forms. Absolutely loved the Korg and Dwayne at the end.
Yeah. Dwayne the Rock.
Dwayne the Rock, yes.
Like, oh my God. There's a part of me that wonders if maybe Taika Waititi like improvised that line at the end. Like his name was Dwayne, or if he actually wrote the script.
No, that was on purpose. I just saw something that said that was purposeful and yeah.
Well,
I still love it.
I give him all credit.
Yeah.
And Valkyrie, her love for her sisters, and the loss to be the only sister left.
Yeah.
All of it, and parent to child and parent to adopted child. And I mean, it was love in every form, and worshiper to deity.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of, I think it was mentioned in our last podcast with Miriam Antivin, is that I think everything that we're going to look at has got a number of connections that we could make to Judaism, right? There was other things that I was looking at regarding like light and dark, because that played a really great theme throughout this in terms of scenery and imagery and whatnot. Yeah. I think that's what's really nice about this podcast is we're going to keep exploring these topics, however they are. And whoever leads that episode is going to bring their own unique take to whatever it is. And we're going to be able to explore that in depth.
I'm really glad you like our podcast, bro.
Thanks. Me too. Me too.
And let me say on this 11th episode that you two are doing a great job.
Oh, thanks. I wish you'd step it up a bit. We'll carry
You're
you.
Great too.
We'll carry you
RDY.
through.
I was fishing.
That's okay. Oh, I think that's totally appropriate. This episode comes out the day after RDY's birthday. So happy belated birthday.
Happy
RDY.
birthday.
Aww.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
If
you'd like to send a birthday email, it's torsmash@gmail.com.
It's great. The only other thing I would want to mention as we kind of begin to move towards the end of this episode is
let's begin.
It wasn't let's begin the entrance. This is us talking in the parking lot after the meeting concluded at the synagogue. Like we're almost done. We're almost there.
Yeah.
It wasn't really until the end that I really fully appreciated the parallels between Thor and Gore beyond the rhyming of their names. But like there's some real parallels there. And normally I kind of feel like it's a little cheesy when that happens, but I thought in this movie I was like, oh, this worked really well. I was a fan.
There was a whole stretch I was thinking at one point of like it's Thor, Gore, Thor 4, right? They could have named it Thor 4, the Gore story. Like,
told by Korg.
Right, told by Korg. Right, 100%.
It's like the G's in our last episode. All these characters have Korg. Jane Foster.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Mjolnir.
All right, let me finish by saying that whether you believe in divine intervention or that God controls all things or not, I think we can all agree that life is complicated. It's hard to put yourself in another person's shoes or even try and understand life, especially when you're struggling with something hard like love or death. So wherever life takes you, I hope it feels more like Valhalla and way less anywhere near like those screaming goats.
I liked the goats a lot.
Yeah.
Can I also say, side note, while we were recording this podcast, my daughter, who is at the OC fair as we record, sent me a picture of a goat that she just saw wandering around the fair. Oh, and I asked her, was it pulling a boat? And she didn't understand. So
now are we in a goat boat rhymings thing now?
I don't know about that.
Yeah. All right. Well, that'll do it for this episode of Torah Smash. Our fiscal sponsor is Jewish Creativity International. Our theme music was created by Sean Fogel. You can check out Sean's bands and studio work at www.thesleepywest.com. This episode is supported in part by Magnetic Shul. Magnetic Shul is a tech-free, self-contained toy perfect for prepared parents, Jewish educators, and youth professionals. The colorful sets invite children to play and create their own stories. Each comes with a synagogue background and over 50 magnets of the people and props we encounter while at shul. Through Magnetic Shul, children are encouraged to play, developing familiarity with the sacred space. Ultimately, Magnetic Shul is where kids play to pray. To learn more about Magnetic Shul, visit www.magneticshul.com or contact its creator directly at justin@magneticshul.com. We want to hear from you and continue today's nerdy discussion. Go to torahsmash.com to find where to connect with us online, email us directly, find previous episodes, and more. And RDY, could you read the inscription that Odin left on this podcast?
Whosoever listens to this podcast, if they be worthy, shall possess the power of Thor, Ra.
So that part's not staying in.